you all. I'm delighted that you're all here to join us today for this AKEB secondary webinar. We have, as a team, listened to the feedback that's come back from the previous webinars. We've also considered the challenge with going back to school next week. And I'm really hoping that today give you some insight strategies. The AKEB is committed to making sure that Jamaat during this time are able to have guidance and support around what's going on. And equally, we want to make sure that families are not falling behind educationally. In terms of housekeeping, we've got a couple of things. So we are asking that webinar participants remain on mute, and ideally, just because of the internet connection, videos will kind of stay off as well. And just also, we are videoing this webinar so that it's able to be accessed afterwards for the Jamaat to use at other times. So, in terms of our speakers, I am delighted to share with you all who the panelists have. Shalina Ladha, who is an educational psychologist and integrative counsellor. We've got Dr. Shemin Mohammed, who is a child and paediatric clinical psychologist. And we've got Hakam Ali, who is a secondary computer science teacher and is also head of Year 10. I'm particularly delighted because we've got mental health specialists, but also a pastoral secondary-based lead. And I'm really excited to have their input over these questions that we're going to be addressing today. And in terms of the questions, we've some questions using guidance with the health boards. We've kind of thought about what questions are probably the most pertinent for families at this. You will see at the bottom that there is a chat function. So please do ask us questions. We're here to help, and I know that the panel is really excited and committed to making sure that this experience is as useful and as helpful for the Jamaat. So over to the questions, and my first question is, how do I support my child with returning to school learning success rate? And I suppose from my vantage point, I can imagine after 2 weeks being off, it's been kind of a chance to be away from the demands of having to complete school learning. How do we get everyone back into it? So, Shemin, please.
Yalamadeh, everyone. Thank you, Sugra, for inviting me onto this webinar. So as you just mentioned, the children have been on Easter holidays for the last couple of weeks, and the school term is due to begin quite soon. So one of the key ways that you can support your child is through preparation. Prepare them for the new routine in advance by reminding them that the school routine will be restarting. Work together with them to develop a schedule and talk about what the new routine will look like. Some of you will already have a schedule perhaps that you were using previously, so it may be helpful to revisit this and think about whether this needs changing in any way. The key thing is to work in collaboration with your child and agree on the schedule. This will give your child a sense of control and predictability. The older children may want to take more of a lead on this, whereas the younger ones may need more support. The key thing is that you and your child are on the same page. And it's important to remember that getting into any new routine takes time. So this will also be the same for your child. So be responsive to them in adjusting to the new schedule. If they don't get into it straight away, allow them to ease themselves gently into it. It may take them a few days to adjust.
So just to add to that,
Thank you, Roger.
so from a teacher's perspective and a head of learning, head of year, we see students after a break come in. Sometimes, you know, like a Monday morning, going to school, going to work, we don't really feel motivated. So what we can do here is kind of adapt ourselves as a coach, and try and think from a different perspective, and try and motivate them and inspire them by like having authentic conversations with them and finding out what the subject is that they're going to be studying, what they're going to be doing, and working with them and like coaching them through the work. So you could use this opportunity to set small tasks, small goals and targets to really kind of identify, let's say on Monday morning they've got 6 pieces of work to do. Break it down into small pieces and really set them goals and targets, and set them rewards and incentives to really push through and give them as much encouragement as possible. So really try and put on a new act and inspire them, and be really enthusiastic about it, and allow that to mirror upon them as well. It's a great opportunity for you to really develop your relationship with your child. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Emma and Majid. We're going to be looking at is just one moment. My child is feeling anxious about the time off from being in school. How do I support my child in talking about how long schools may be closed for? This I suppose could be quite nerve-wracking for families, because there isn't necessarily a sense of the end date. Shalina, can I ask you to start, please?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for inviting me onto the webinar. I'm really pleased to be here. So the question is, my child is feeling anxious about time off from being in school. I think for me, I would like to unpick that a little bit and think about that word anxiety. Anxiety caused when somebody's feeling worried, somebody's perhaps feeling a little bit threatened, somebody's feeling scared. So I would like parents and carers to think with their children about what they might be feeling anxious about. Children might be feeling anxious for different reasons. It could be that they're feeling anxious about missing their friends, and that's something we're going to come on to a little bit later in the webinar. It could be that they're feeling anxious about not being able to keep up with some of the work that they're getting from school. It could be that they're feeling anxious about the fact that they don't know when they're going back to school. So there could be different reasons for them being anxious. So I think first and foremost, it would be about thinking with them about what their anxiety is about. Why is it that they're feeling worried? And then I think what I would say is really empathize and acknowledge what they're feeling. Because I think what we need to remember is we're all feeling different things at the moment, and all feelings are valid. All feelings are okay. And it's important to say to them that actually we understand that you might be feeling a little bit worried, a bit nervous, a bit scared, but it's okay to feel like that. We need to follow their lead in terms of how it is that they're feeling or what it is that they might be communicating. And I think it's really, really important to remember to think about how they're presenting. So, for example, a child that's feeling anxious may be actually presenting in a way where they are their behavior is quite aggressive. They could be quite angry. They could withdraw into themselves. They could become quite introvert. But those are the primary behaviors that we might be noticing, observing and seeing. But actually what may be underneath all of that is anxiety. So I always say to parents that you know your children best. You are the ones that are with them, day to day. So really think about what it is you're seeing your children doing, how it is that they're behaving, and think about what that behavior means to you and to them, and then respond accordingly. And notice any signs and signals that may be a little bit more worrying for you. So, for example, if you see your child becoming a little bit more obsessional, perhaps they might be nail biting, or there may be other behaviours like they're washing their hands, more often than you think is necessary. Just keep an eye on those things. As I say, you are the best teacher of your child, so you please notice what you're seeing and then respond accordingly to that and follow their lead. If I could maybe ask my colleague Shamin to add to that, if there is anything else.
Yeah, as you mentioned, there's lots of uncertainty currently, and school is a really big one for young people at this time. So just to echo what you've been saying about really tuning in to what your child is feeling and how they're expressing themselves. I guess it's also thinking about how do we talk with school or talk with our children about how long school will be closed for. And at this time, we just really don't know the answer to that. And it's important for us to be honest with our children. And I think it's okay for us as parents not to have all the answers, and to also let your children know that and tell them that. And additionally, if your children ask you any questions, or if you need some time to reflect, just say to them that you'll get back to them. It shouldn't be that parents feel that they need to answer things on the spot. I guess one of the things that's important to mention is that sometimes children may be spending too much time either checking the internet or watching the news, and this can be potentially unhelpful and increase anxiety. So therefore it's important that this is monitored and that this may need to be limited in some way. In terms of helping children with managing and processing their emotions, parents can encourage children to engage in activities that help them to express how they're feeling. So some examples of this may be encouraging them to talk to you or other family members, encouraging them to write things down in a diary or a journal, either having some quiet time alone, playing sport, or being creative in some way through maybe painting or drawing. Every child will be different in terms of how they cope and manage their emotions. So it may be different things will be different for your child in terms of what's potentially helpful for them. So you may need to encourage them to try different activities. It's also important for parents to manage their own anxieties and reactions at this time. This will help your child to feel contained and help them with their anxiety. Because as parents, if we're feeling overwhelmed, your children will pick up on this. So it's helpful to make time to do things with you and your family that help you in stressful situations. So this may be watching a movie together, perhaps doing some exercise, or taking out your dustbin. Doing activities will help you really connect with your child and develop that relationship, just as Majid mentioned earlier, about really connecting with your child and developing that. And this will help you to be able to support your child better. So things that you can do if you are worried about your child's anxiety or emotional well-being are, we're really fortunate to have our institutions. So we currently have the coronavirus helpline. So if parents are concerned about their child's anxiety or their emotional well-being, they can contact the helpline and get support through that. The helpline is not just for physical health symptoms. There's also the Healthy Minds team, which is part of the Health Board. So again, those contact details can be found on the IO UK app. And this is a team of specialists who will be able to speak to you about your concerns and signpost you and support you with getting the appropriate advice. Locally, there's also your GP as the first point of contact who you can speak to about your worries or concerns, and they'll also be able to refer you on to the appropriate support that's available out there in your local area. There's also various websites that have really useful, helpful information for parents. So some of these include Young Minds, the NSPCC, Barnardo's, Childline. These websites have a wealth of information for parents and also young children to think about their anxiety and emotional well-being.
Shemin, thank you so much, and thank you in particular for giving those signposts for spaces where Jamati members can access help. I think it's difficult to know where to turn to sometimes in these sorts of moments. I think especially if this has kind of exposed a set of challenges that potentially families experienced before. So thank you for only the answers, Shalina and Colin, but also for offering that space for signposting. The next question is about, sorry, my thing just needs to, it's about parental anxiety and about parents who are worried that they're not able to support home. So, you know, you're obviously, I'm thinking this is a secondary based webinar, potentially parents aren't subject specialists, and you know, there are some key years going on here in the secondary phase, key examined kind of moments. What can parents do in terms of these sorts of concerns? And Shemin, if I could ask you to start again.
Yes, thank you. So this is a really difficult time for parents at the moment, and we all recognise that parents have a really tough job at the moment and are juggling multiple demands, you know, as well as being parents. Parents are homeschooling their children, as well as working and also running the household. So I think it's important that we all recognise that this is easy, and just to say that actually that you're all doing a really great job in these current circumstances. So in terms of supporting your child with their learning, I think what parents can do is to do their best with supporting their child with what learning they can and utilising their strengths. It may be helpful to link up with other people to support you in areas perhaps where parents feel less skilled or less knowledgeable. This may be family or friends, but this also may be school, and I think it's okay actually for parents to speak to school if they're concerned and to see what support might be available out there for them that they can provide. I would also think about actually thinking about things that you can do together with your child and how you can learn together. So it may be helpful to use maybe any available time that you have to look up information together and to learn together.
Thank you, Shemin. Majid, do you have any additional comments to add in, especially in your role as a head of Year 10? You've obviously got experience of seeing students in their first year of their GCSEs. What kind of additional input would you have or advice you'd give?
So I'd suggest to start off with is being in communication regularly with the school and with the subject teachers. We're all here to support parents and students, and collectively what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are being as consistent as possible. There are lots and lots of resources online, but what I'm mindful of is that because there's so many resources, we're not entirely sure what's the most reliable. So reliability of resources is key here. So working with the school and connecting with the school so that you have access to reliable resources in connection with the curriculum that your children are studying. So connect with the school, be in regular communication with them, and make sure that you're also in communication with other parents to seek advice and support, and also communicate with them to kind of work together collectively. And that's key here, working together with the school, the teachers. If you're emailing teachers, try and copy in either members of the department or the school to see if maybe other members of the school have or other teachers have any advice that they can offer as well. Again, we're here to support you and the students as much as possible through this process. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid. And yeah, just to echo that, as a secondary specialist myself, schools are kind of the first port of call for any parents. Schools know what boards your sons and daughters are doing, and as parents, you should feel fully kind of permitted to go and speak to your school. Like, we're still open, we're still functioning, and so making that contact is something that you are entitled to do, especially if you are worried. And schools really want to support your sons and daughters in making sure that they've got the best possible chances. So do reach out. In terms of the next question, this is about motivation, and I can imagine it's potentially a huge challenge for parents where motivation's not necessarily remaining. We're now in the 4th week of lockdown. The question is, a child is refusing to complete the work set or is rushing through it quickly. Support them in completing it to the best of their ability. In terms of who's going to start, is it Shalina or is it Majid?
Shalina.
Shalina.
And you're quite right. Thank you. It's about motivation. It is about how we keep them focused as they sort of continue with their education at home through this lockdown period. I think as well as motivation, it's also about continuing to think about the relationship between the young person and the parent stroke caregiver. I think without that relationship, which is kind of a cornerstone, it's key, it's fundamental, I think it will be much more difficult to support them. I think as a parent myself, I kind of think about my own experience. I have a son who is at secondary school, and I know that it's really important for me to continue to develop that sort of trust and that relationship while we're at home, because I think as children get older, it can be more challenging sometimes, because as they become more independent and become a little bit more strong-willed about doing things sort of on their own agenda, then it can be a little bit more complicated. So I would say that in terms of sort of thinking about them rushing through their work, first and foremost, I would be wanting to try and understand a little bit about why they're rushing through their work. Is it because they are sort of lacking motivation? Is it because they're struggling with the task that's been set? Or is it because they're just feeling sort of quite deflated and sort of not wanting to engage at this time? So I think, again, for me, it would be initially about unpicking that question and thinking they're refusing to complete their work, but why are they refusing to complete their work? If it's because they're feeling a little bit worried, anxious, or deflated, then again, it's about being responsive to that and thinking about how we can get them to be more engaged and sort of lift their mood and lift their spirit, lift their confidence, and try and sort of engage with them to build their self-esteem. If it's something much more about the learning task and them struggling to actually respond to the learning task itself, then it's something we can think about in relation to how we get the support and the help of other people. Perhaps in the first instance, the school themselves. If they're the ones setting the tasks online, it could be a conversation that the young person or the parent caregiver has with the schools. And perhaps in a minute, Majid can talk a little bit more about how we can engage with schools around that. But I think what's really, really important in this situation, as I say, in relation to this idea about building a trusting relationship, is actually thinking with our child and being available to support them and motivate them, and really give them lots and lots of praise and lots of love, and think about what they're doing well. Always think about sort of praising the things that they're doing, the effort that they're making, and thinking about how we get away from being critical about what they're not doing. So lots of praise, lots of support, really building that relationship with them, and using any kind of rewards or incentives that you have that will work with them to actually build that relationship, and think about how to continue to motivate them as they go through the kind of learning activities. And perhaps, Majid, if I could just hand over to you now and just think a little bit about yourself as an educator and how you might respond, as a member of school staff if a young person was concerned or a parent was concerned about their learning.
Yeah, thank you. So just to start off, this isn't something new, okay? So every single teacher will have to go through what you're going through, okay? Students are students, okay? Or kids are kids. They're gonna be times where they just want to get through the work as quickly as possible, or they're refusing to do the work. That happens, okay? But that's fine. It's okay. This is a great opportunity for you, because you're at an advantage. You are the parent. You know them the best, and quite frankly, you're in a great situation because you're developing and building upon this relationship, because you're getting to know them a little bit more. Okay, so it's all about being positive, finding out what drives them, what inspires them, and developing like this is a great opportunity to develop work ethic and develop their values and figure out what type of attitudes they have. if attitude is defined as a long-lasting learned predisposition to react to certain things, then what we can do is we can develop habits, develop good habits and reward them. Let's think about meritocracy, you know, develop a philosophy of doing something well and them being acknowledged for it and being rewarded for it. Okay, and if they see that works, that's great, and let's build upon that, build a habit. Small doses of studying independently also builds resilience as well. Okay, so really encourage them, motivate them, inspire, like they will be inspired by what they want to achieve in life. Okay, so I know it's a bit of a deep conversation, but what is their purpose in life? What do they want to do after school, after college, after university? What do they want to become? Do they want to become a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer? What do they want to do? You know, let's sit down with them and also take some time to look into some careers that they would like to get involved in and identify what it takes to get there. Okay, what does it take in terms of qualifications, but what most importantly, what does it take to get there in terms of their attitude and the work ethic to get there. So really use this as an opportunity to really work with them to get them to the next level. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid and Shalina. It's really lovely to hear that response. And I think the one thing that I'm really hearing echoing coming through is that these sorts of challenges are not a quick fix. They'll take time. They'll take a kind of persistence from everybody because habits take time to form, and having that perseverance to kind of look at it as an opportunity isn't it? There is an opportunity here in this crisis. The next question is about results, and specifically kind of targeted at parents who've got children who are either in year 11 or year 13, where obviously we've had the examinations cancelled, and potentially our daughters feeling quite anxious about that. So Majid, could I ask you to start and then Shemin to come in afterwards?
Sure. So I'm going to start off by sharing what I shared with some of the year 11 students just before they broke off from school. And I kept it really simple. It's all about remaining calm right now, taking one day at a time, and also sticking to the facts. What do we know? And what we know is that the government are working on a plan, and we should stick to what the government are saying at the moment and try not to listen in too many opinions and stick to the facts. So refer to the government websites, the DFE, and the exam board that your children are working with. Okay, so that could be AQA or EdXL, for example. And there are other exam boards as well, but stick to the facts. Stick to the organizing bodies that we know are reliable sources. Okay, so let's keep it simple, keep it calm, stick to reliable facts. Following on from what I was saying before is also think about personal growth here. If you're thinking about the results and worrying about what the results are, we'll get to that stage because it hasn't been finalized yet. But what we can do in this time is also develop our personal growth. So think about what are the skills that we can develop for the future. Okay, could we spend some time volunteering, supporting other people, and really enhancing our CV for the future? So making the most of this opportunity as well.
Thank you, Majid. And you know, I think before we go on to Shemin's kind of piece, the government guidance is there. Ofcom have published an open letter to students. Still, schools are working through what that looks like. And just to echo what Majid has said, being calm and just kind of listening to the guidance from the government is probably the only thing one can do right now. Shemin, do you have any additional comments regarding this question?
I think just like we've been saying throughout this whole webinar is actually, be there to listen to your child, acknowledge how they're feeling. Some of how they're feeling is very normal under the current abnormal situation that we're in. Remind them that they've tried their best and that you'll be proud of them, whatever results that they achieve. This may be a time where children particularly need lots more attention, reassurance. Let them know that you're proud of their efforts. One thing that might be helpful is actually developing a list of coping statements with them if they're feeling particularly worried on a regular basis or anxious. So some examples might be writing things down, such as statements such as, I've tried my best, my parents are proud of me. There will be options if things don't turn out as I'd like. And it would be helpful for parents to encourage their child to use these regularly and to direct them to them, particularly when they're feeling worried about the situation. I think it's also important to think a little bit about acceptance and help for us to help children to think about this and how we can develop that in some way. And one technique that might be helpful to think about or strategy is mindfulness. And some parents might be familiar with this. So mindfulness is about paying attention purposefully in the present moment, non-judgmentally to our current experience. So instead of getting caught up in worries about the future like we all do, or thinking about things that have happened in the past, and it's natural for us to do these things. What mindfulness encourages us to do is focus very much on the here and now and accept or work towards an acceptance about how things are. And the Aga Khan Health Board has done lots of videos that are available for the Jamaat, and some of you may have seen these. These are being distributed via the Al Sahar newsletter as Mindful Mondays. I think additionally as well, it's just following on from what Majid said as well, is about actually thinking about personal growth and thinking about what activities your child can do at this time to develop and better themselves. So this will help them with their self-esteem and emotional well-being. It's really important that during this time that we're providing children with opportunities to feel good about themselves.
Just to follow up on that as well, I think it's a great opportunity to also think about the next steps. So the next steps, for example, if your child is thinking about, or if your child is going into year 9 or into the next stage of their education where they're going to think about choosing the GCSEs, this is an opportunity to start thinking about what GCSEs to choose. And if they're doing their GCSEs at the moment or next year, maybe think about what they can do for the A levels that they want to choose. Okay, and the same for the students that are taking the A levels at the moment. What degree do they want to take, or if it's an apprenticeship, or if it's a job they want to go straight into? Is there anything specifically that they can do in order to help develop and really motivate them to do well in what they're doing at the moment, but also focus on the future as well? All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid and Shemin, for those really comprehensive answers. On to our final question before we go on to questions from the Jamaat. And thank you to those of you that have already submitted questions. Please do keep them coming. So the final question is about potentially the sense of loss that young people are feeling from the sense of community that school brings. I know as a teacher, I'm definitely missing seeing my students, and don't know if they're feeling the same way about me, but I definitely am feeling the sense of loss of community. And it's about finding the balance between them connecting with their friends, being on social media, but also all of the concerns with the kind of prolonged period of time being on social media. So how can parents get the balance right? Shalina, if you could start, and then I'll go on to Majid. Shalina?
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes, perfect.
So for this one, social relationships and missing friends is, again, something that we need to normalize for our children. They are with their friends every day when they're at school, so they're bound to be missing their friends. And actually, for me, I would say that this is a positive thing, because having friends, you know, and developing social relationships is a very important of human interactions in general. So actually, you know, them saying that they're missing their friends is something that we can talk to them about, and again, just reiterate that this is a time, you know, in their lives where things are not quite, in quotes, normal, not quite the same as they generally are. So it's perfectly understandable and reasonable to hear them saying that they're missing their friends and their friendships and their interactions with them, that, you know, the types of interactions that they would normally have on a day-to-day basis. I think the thing that we need to understand is that we live in an age now where the internet and social media are a very big part of what our children are sort of responding to. And there are lots of different ways in which, you know, young people are connecting through all the social media platforms that are out there, as well as all the sort of the games that they sort of are on, and all the different chat sites as well. So I think that's definitely something we have to acknowledge. Things are very different for them, you know, compared to some of us. You know, when we were growing up, it was a different way in which we would communicate with our friends. However, I think it is very important to think about the amount of time that they spend on social media. And in a minute, Majid will come on to talk to us a little bit about internet safety. But I think perhaps thinking with them, and I think Shemin had mentioned this earlier, it's really important to work alongside our children. You know, they're young people now, and actually telling them what to do and being a sort of a directive parent is not going to be a relationship where they will sort of, which will engender trust. So it's much more about thinking with them about, you know, the time that they spend on the internet, the time they spend on social media, and how we can perhaps think with them about some kind of contractual agreement, if that's workable, you know, and actually get them to buy into that and think with them about what is, you know, what is advisable sort of for them based on any homework activities they've got, any learning activities, and also sort of on social media platforms as well. So just thinking with them together, acknowledging their feelings that actually is a difficult time and they will be missing their friends, and how they can stay connected to them, you know, whether it be through social media or in other ways, other more creative ways that they might be able to think about with you, through journaling, you know, through sort of talking on the telephone, anything else that they might be able to do together to sort of stay connected, because I think that's what that's about. Staying connected is going to be important to them. So perhaps at this point I could hand over to Majid just to tell us a little bit more about his experience of working in a school, and maybe some more information about sort of staying internet aware and safe.
Thank you. So I've spoken to a few of my students, and they are really missing school. They're the type of student that I wouldn't have ever thought that they would be missing school. They actually said, it's weird, sir. It's like when I'm at school, all I want to do is go home and be on my bed and sleep, play on my computer. But right now, all I want to do is go to school. So it's really strange. They're going through a mixture of emotions. Yeah, we have to acknowledge that. But we have to really, really be real and acknowledge that they live in two different worlds. They live in reality, our world, and they live in a world where it's all online, okay? And that's a space for them to be who they want. That's like a different persona for them. And we have no idea what they are going through when they're online, okay? So I'm going to be straight with you. You need to be building relationships with them that positive, so that it allows them to come to you and approach you and talk to you authentically, because quite frankly, they are vulnerable online. We are all vulnerable online, which is why we have antivirus software, internet security. We teach students about social engineering and malicious software. No, it's because it's out there, and we have to be we need to be real with this. So there are incidents where there are fake accounts created, for example, on Instagram, and this can be created over social engineering. So social engineering is about identifying what people are like online and using those details to create a new persona, like identity theft. Okay, and there are different social engineering ways of doing that, and that could be, for example, creating a fake account, initiating a conversation with you, and finding out a bit more about you. Okay, and then then they can create more accounts. Okay, and that happens on a regular basis. Now, there are lots of situations where there are students or young people who will give away information or even images of themselves. Now, this is called sexting, and this happens. Now, we have to be mindful of the fact that because this happens, and if you think back to when you're a teenager, would you actually inform your parent about something that happens around this? It's very difficult to, which is why I'm saying be approachable, develop that authentic relationship, okay, where you can have an authentic, straight conversation. You know, we don't want them to keep things to themselves, and we want to make sure that they're safe, and we are talking to them about what they're doing online, and that they are informed about what they should be doing, what they shouldn't be doing online as well. Okay, and making sure that they realize that they have a digital footprint as well. And a digital footprint basically means whatever you do online can be traced. So every single website that you go onto has a database which has a log of your IP address, which is basically your address basically, and that will be configured to your device setting and the GPS, for example, and the camera on your phone or your device. Okay, so everything's connected. Everything has a digital footprint. And we inform students about this, and we inform students about being safe online. So even though they're at home and they're safe, they have their phones, they have access to the internet, and they do have a realm of opportunity to create whatever they want. And sometimes they get lured into a false sense of security. And this is what we need to be mindful of. And if we're mindful of it, let's have a conversation with them about it. But let's do it in a nice, calm, approachable way so that we can build that conversation with them. Thank you.
Thank you, Majid. Shalina, did you have any additional comments on this?
Yes, just one comment. As Majid was speaking about internet safety, it occurred to me that the other side of that is that there are some opportunities to access websites which are very, very supportive for young people. So one of the websites that we've recently launched, where I'm working in North London, and it may be worth parents investigating to see if they're up and running in the local authorities and boroughs that their young children attend school in, is a website called KOOTH, spelled capital KOOTH. And this is a free, confidential online counselling service that young children can actually link into. I believe they can refer themselves, and it's for young people from the ages of 11 onwards, and it's run and manned by trained therapists who are accredited by the BACP, the British Association of Counselling and Psychotherapy. So they're all trained counsellors. And it made me think about the young people that are particularly worried, particularly anxious, particularly vulnerable, those children that might be missing their friends and not quite sure who else to turn to in a time like this. So I think something like KOOTH, where all the information is stored confidentially, is somewhere that they could go. And I know that if the therapists that were working with the young people online were particularly worried about anything that they were saying, then they would be signposting them on as well, in a way that Shemin was talking earlier. So I think KOOTH would be a website that parents and young people could access in a very safe way.
Thank you, Shalina. Okay, so Shemin, do you have any additional comments for this question before I move on to questions from the?
I think so. Just as Shalene has mentioned, Truth, I think that's a really good resource, and that's a really good forum that's out there and available for children. There's also recently been an app that's been launched that's called Think Ninja. So that's aimed for secondary school children. And that, again, is something that's available. Well, it's basically an app, and on there's lots of various resources. So there's actually like a chat forum on there where there's actually someone who's guiding you through. I think it's the Wise Ninja who's guiding you through how you're feeling and how you can manage with how you're coping. There's lots of different strategies on there, and there's lots of really good resources. So I guess that's just something that I just wanted to add and mention. That might be something that's available and might be useful to some young people.
Okay, thank you. Right now, thank you so much for all your input in those kind of initial pre-planned questions. We have a couple of questions that have come through. So the first question is about managing anxiety within children, and the question is kind of the kind of, on one end you've got children potentially being numb and indifferent to what's going on in the world, versus young people who are so hyper aware that it's causing them anxiety. So kind of a balance between shielding and protecting your sons and daughters from every bit of bad news, and kind of keeping them very cocooned, versus exposing them all to everything, so that they can be really aware of the global situation. The question is, how can we make them conscientious of the current global situation without making them too anxious? Shemin, I wondered if you could start with that before I move on to other questions from the chat.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, a real balance, isn't it, at the moment? I think it's about, there'll be children out there who are actually perhaps feeling really overwhelmed and really anxious about the current situation, and really, are tuning into all the updates and everything that's going on. Whereas you'll have children perhaps who are, perhaps, not as vocal or not as aware or not as much talking about, things that are going on at the moment. And I think how I would approach this is probably, talk to your child about actually how much do they know? How much are they aware of what's going on at the moment? What do they have any questions? Talk to your child, about anything that they may be concerned about, perhaps things that they're not aware about. I think it's really important for parents to model. Perhaps actually it's okay to talk about how you're feeling, and also to let them know that actually, this is a really difficult time. We don't know when the lockdown's going to end. There's so much uncertainty around at the moment, and there's so much change to family life on a day-to-day basis. And actually, it's okay to feel how people are feeling. So, some of the numbness may be, again, due to feeling perhaps overwhelmed. It may be due to perhaps being in denial. And both of those are, emotions to the current situation that we're in the moment. So it's also then thinking about actually going back to some of the things that we've spoken about throughout the webinar, but actually how can we support our child, and what can we do to think about how they can express themselves and manage how they're feeling at this current time.
Thank you, Shemin. I just wanted to ask Shemin just very quickly, a couple of members. I know that the resource that Shalina mentioned was called Kuth, but Shemin, it's something Ninja for the secondary app.
Think Ninja.
Think Ninja.
Yeah, Think Ninja.
And of course, I should say that we are looking to signpost resources to support with young people's mental health and well-being on the Head Start website, and that should be coming out soon. So those two will be included as part of the information and signposting that we are giving as a kind of separate piece of work that the Education Board is doing. Majid, I have a question for you, and it's from a Year 7 parent. It's about how much time they should really be spending on the learning. In essence, they're spending quite a lot of time making the work accessible from what's been set with the teacher from school. She ends up finishing at 9 p.m. because they're having to take lots of breaks during the day to keep her focused. And the parent is working from home, so they're finding it quite a challenge. What would you say is kind of an appropriate starting point? And then Shemin or Shalina, if you'd like to jump in, that would be great. Majid?
Okay, so if your child is struggling with the workload, again, I think the approach is a coaching approach, and target setting, goal setting, and making it fun. And yeah, it shouldn't be focused on the completion of all the tasks. It should be about, are they learning, and are they engaged in the learning, and is the learning actually learnt. We can do tasks for the sake of tasks, but it doesn't really work with most students, most children. If they're engaged and they're really focused on the work, it's because they're interested. And if they're not interested, we really need to make it interesting and making it as fun as possible and enjoyable. This time is difficult for all of us, in particular the students. And if they get a lot of support from their SEN department, maybe speaking to your school's SEN department and seeking more advice and getting some guidelines from them. But my advice would be, make it fun, make it enjoyable and interesting for them, and give them rewards, targets to work towards, and really inspire them. So us as teachers, we act a lot, and it's important to manage your emotions and be a mirror. Okay, so if you want them to be engaged and enjoying it, look like you're enjoying it too, and really work towards creating an environment where they are excited to learn. I know it's difficult. You can choose to make it difficult, or you can choose to make it as fun as possible. And again, that's where the acting comes into it. And I'd really encourage you to be a little bit crazy, be a bit outlandish, and do something different. Really capture their imagination or capture their attention by doing something that they wouldn't normally see you do. As soon as you've got their attention, then you can focus on the tasks that need to be completed, because then you've got their attention.
Thank you, Majid. Just to add to that as well, I think schools are really mindful of the fact that this is a new experience for everybody, and I think that if it is too much, that it's okay to let the school know. And all anyone can ever really ask is that people just try their best. I don't know, I think everyone has to give themselves a bit of compassion and a bit of self kind of compassion as parents. I just think it's a new experience for everybody. I don't know, Shemin or Shalina, if you wish to add in.
We perhaps again just want to think a little bit more with this particular parent about what the sort of protracted timing is about. If this young person has got any individual needs, perhaps, then that would be something we would need to think about a little bit more. If it's more about a kind of a lethargy, then again, is that because the young person is feeling demotivated or quite upset or stressed out? Again, that's something that we'd need to unpick a little bit more. But in the main, I would say, it's really important for all parents to think about this idea of balance, and actually, to be working till 9 p.m. at night is just not helpful, even sort of during school time, unless they're doing exams, etc. It's really important to think about those regular breaks, etc. So I think for this particular parent, it might be just unpicking a little bit more why their child is finding it more difficult to work sort of smarter during the daytime, and then thinking maybe a little bit more about that offline. I'd be happy to speak to this parent if necessary, just to help them with that.
Thank you for that offer, Shalina. Can I just take this opportunity to thank the panelists for their time. I felt really blessed to have 2 mental health specialists and a pastoral lead on this session. And thank you all to the participants who have joined us today. In terms of next steps, we have feedback forms available. And one of the things that we're really curious to know is about the timings of the webinars, and if this time is the best time for participants to join us. So if you have any feedback on that, we'd really appreciate it. Part of the reason why this came out was because it was for in response to feedback from previous webinars that there was a request for us to engage with this topic. So please feel free to share any feedback. It's always a gift. And thank you again for joining us today, and thank you once again for our speakers. As ever, please email us if you have any questions, akeb@iiuk.org. Wishing you all a safe and happy return to school next week. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.